Clarion Gaming. ICE registration is now open. Clarion Gaming, for all your major international gambling expo needs. Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that doesn't know what it's going to say when it opens its mouth. I'm one of your hosts, John Bruford, joined by your other host, Fintan Costello. Fintan, hello.
Hello, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Busy. Last couple of weeks before Christmas, doing a little bit of Christmas shopping. It's always fun. Yeah. Oh,
Nice.
what else? The other thing. I've started my
Finished the
I've
book?
picked my next. No, not yet.
Fuck's sake.
Christmas. I've picked my next race.
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to do Dublin to Belfast in April.
I thought didn't you already tell us that?
Oh, have I? Oh, okay. Well, I've
I
started
don't
the
know.
training. I've started training for it now, so it's a bit different.
Yeah, it's not just a pipe dream.
No, twice a day because it's 100 miles. So I did 2 workouts yesterday, that kind of thing. Shit's got real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are you hoping for a sort of time to finish this in, or just to finish?
To finish and not have to walk a massive chunk of it is kind of the 2 goals, because having to walk is just slow and painful. So I'd rather just be able to run as much of it as I can. So
Have you got any plans to run this for any kind of cause?
nope.
There's some great casino industry charities. Phil's been fundraising for the Dogs Home on Malta. There's the Rank supports the Carers Trust, for example. There's also the fabulous, and I really do mean this, Chips, the gambling industry charity, which provides bespoke motorized wheelchairs to children who need them.
Oh, that's really nice.
Fucking is, yeah.
I've kind of got 2 views on this. One is I like to keep charity private. I think some people do charity for the wrong reason. Like, it's that kind of to be seen to do charity, and more about the
ostentatiously. It's like ostentatious grieving. It fucking annoys me.
Well, I think there's a place for I know what you mean as well. Like, oh my God, Diana died.
Exactly, great example.
So I think for me, charity's a private thing, and then I think for these kind of races, I know a lot of people will do a marathon or do whatever to raise money for a cause or whatever, and I think that works for them. It's great, but I prefer for these to have the intrinsic motivation rather than the extrinsic, and ultimately that's works better for me.
That's how I did. So I've done London Marathon twice. I've done Edinburgh once, and all 3 of them I did as fundraisers for my local hospice.
Perfect.
Because their government funding is very limited, and they do amazing work, and you can't be somewhere like Ludlow and not know somebody that's used the hospice. Basically, I mean, it touches everybody's life in some way. But what was really cool, so it wasn't. I wanted to do London, and the ballot is just a fucking nightmare. So I took one of their golden bond places. So anybody not familiar with this, charities can buy tickets to races, and you then have to make X amount of money for the charity. And I went way over what I had to raise, and I just saw that as booking my room at a later date in that hospice, because it's a very nice hospice, and if I'm going to a hospice, I want to go to 7 Hospice. But when I did my second London Marathon, I actually there's a local punk band called DNR, and they're one of DNR, a chap called Johnny Lawrence. His son had died. I think he was 19 when he died. Were very aggressive and unusual in a teenager form of bowel cancer, and they found that there was no support for for families with older teens because they're treated as adults.
Oh, okay.
So there was just no support, and it cost them a fortune with like staying near the hospital and petrol and stuff because we're in a rural area and all this sort of jazz. But the almost the entire band trained for and completed the London Marathon, and I had the delightful privilege of helping them train, and it was it was an excellent experience. But here's a freaky thing, right? So I was John and myself both did London and Edinburgh because Edinburgh was I think it was like 5 weeks after London, and I was staying at a friend's flat in Glasgow. Me and John were both staying at a friend's flat in Glasgow, and we went out, and you're in Glasgow, so we got kebab, and we're walking down the street, and I saw this. I must have told you this. I saw this Scrabble tile on the floor.
I've heard this one.
And I'm like, I can't not pick it up because it was face down. And I had to pick it up. And I forget what letter it was. First time. I walk along and there's another fucking tile. And all the while we're talking, John is talking about how he feels that Joel, his son, is still present in some way. He still feels his presence. He's still very much a part of his consciousness. And then there's another fucking tile, and I looked at the fucking tiles, and they spelled RUN.
Wow.
Now, either somebody's trying to tell us to buy an urn, or Joel was telling us to fucking run. I've still got the tiles as well. They're in my desk somewhere.
That's amazing. If you put that in a movie...
That's my Irish ghost story.
If you put that in a movie, nobody would believe it.
People would be like, God, this is shit. Why didn't they cut this bit out? I could have gotten out of here earlier. No, it was a freaky experience. Anyway, John finished way ahead of me. And I was one of the few people to ever leave Scotland with sunburn. So that went well. Seriously. It's like the 2 times I've run London, both times temperatures were over 20 degrees. Right, I think it was about 22 the one time. Well, for an April marathon, you do all your training, you do all your big training through February.
You've done all your training during the winter months in the wind and the rain, and you'd literally have to acclimatise for 20 plus degrees.
It was horrible, and like heat. I was even heavier at the time. I was probably about 18 stone at the time, and heat was just absolutely 100% my kryptonite, and it just slayed me. And then when we went to do Edinburgh, we're like, we'll be fine. It's Scotland. I had such fucking sunburn. Oh, it was so bad. But also, I'd like to lay one little claim to fame in this. That I can't remember which one of us did this first, but me and John, when we were on the train on the way back, we were the first people to realise that the marathon finishers medal was shaped like a dick. And so we're sitting on the train and we're both like, fucking look at it, it's a cock, we've got a big metal cock. Right? And the next thing you know, everybody on the train, all of whom have just finished the race, they're all like turning their medal over, and then you see people taking fucking pictures of it. I'm like, look what we've done. Oh, good times. Back when I could run.
More innocent times.
Well, yeah, maybe.
Who do we have in the podcast?
But just one other. So Johnny Lawrence does have a connection to the casino industry, kind of, because he no longer lives in Ludlow. He's gone to live in France in a place called Beaune. And Beaune is where Gaming Partners International is headquartered. The probably the biggest manufacturer of gambling chips and currency in the world, I think.
That's a fun fact.
True story. Yeah. So anyway, who have we got on the podcast, Fintan? You must know.
I do. We've got Robert. I'm going to take a stab at his surname.
It's easy, his surname.
Lenzhofer.
Lenzhofer. Yeah,
Lenzhofer. From Hölle Games.
That was good. You did. Yeah, you did that well.
Yeah, I did that well. Holle Games are they're more than that now, but they started off as a German-facing slots game studio, So it's designed to deal with the new German regulations, but also designed for a German audience. Robert's super smart, small team. They've done everything themselves, no external funding. They've grown the business rapidly, lots of happy customers.
It's more
They've
than
built,
doubled in size, I'd heard.
apparently so, while still keeping the headcount to an absolute minimum. So a lot of smart tech, a lot of smart automation. Big games portfolio, super smart back end. They're now, providing B2B services, expanding into new markets. And yeah, we've a big long chat about that journey, everything going on there. We touch on things like AI, entering new markets, invoicing, things like this. Super, yeah, just one of my favorite people. I love just smart people who are just doing clever things. It's great.
Yeah, and you don't get that when we're recording the intro, so it's good that you get it from the guest. That is good. That is good.
Yeah.
So, I will share one little thing
Go on.
because I have brought this up occasionally. So Fern and the kids are waiting on news to move into their disabled adapted house,
Mm-hmm.
and they have just got a moving date.
Oh, fantastic news.
It
That's
is. Now we
great.
just got to figure out what we're going to put on the fucking floor.
Okay, yeah. That's
Good times. But, it's a better problem to have than not having a floor to put something on.
exactly that.
So, first world problems. Okay, so let's speak to Robert Lenzhofer, returning guest, friend of the podcast, and Hölle Games. If only there were a company that could look after all my needs in performance media, sales optimization, consulting, mobile growth. Some fabulous team of magnificent, magnificent people who would just help me out with some media buying in sports with exclusive content. Oh, if only there was such a company. Hold on, what's this? BWise Media? www.bwisemedia.com? I shall look into it. They sound perfect. We're joined by this week's guest. We're a returning guest, but it's been a while. We're joined by Robert Lenzhofer as co-founder and CEO of Hölle Games. Hello.
Hi.
It's been a while. I mean, what kept you?
Well, it's the typical sentence, been busy, yeah? That's what everybody says in the industry, I guess. But
You don't need to talk to us about busy, Robert. Fintan's here. He is the, if you look at busy in the dictionary, there's a picture of Fintan.
So for everyone, the reason I'm laughing so much, so just before this, I was unwrapping a Christmas gift, and I've been eating some nougat and a cup of tea. So clearly, it's flat out in Fintan Towers this week. It's a hard life.
But you're being a chairman. What you've got is it's all going on upstairs. Your brain, it never quits. That's why they pay you the big bucks.
True. That is true.
Yeah. Whereas me, my brain could switch off at any time. Sometimes in mid-sentence.
Just like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect any more from me today. Yeah, that's it. It's gone. It's gone. I'm out of here. I've checked out. Although, yeah, I am a little tired, but that's no excuse. So, Robert, how have you been?
yeah, good. We started this company 3 years ago now, roughly. So it's been quite the journey. We went different, I think, than many other companies in this space. We went fully bootstrapped, and we aren't rich. There's this. I find it quite funny when you read a PR article of a new company that has just launched, and it's a startup, and it raised 25 million. I'm like, and
How?
you're doing another platform, like
I know.
you're not a startup. Like startups per definition are slightly built differently. They are typically more risky than sort of, talking to your old clients with a new product, let's say. And they're typically more trying on the scale of trying to solve kind of new problems, so to say. And so, we started 3 years ago. We are 7 now, but we started as 4, and the 5th person joined quickly, and now we are 7, 8 by January. So we're not really like having a lot of staff. We're trying to keep it cash flow positive.
Yeah, but for the press release, I would be saying you've more than doubled in size.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. We do that on the revenue side, anyways. That's for my December basically message. It's going to be doubled in size again from last year.
So for the new listeners who mightn't have heard the previous podcast, can you give a quick overview of what you guys do? Because I think that it's a pretty unique, or it's very unique product offering.
Yeah, so we do 2 things, and they are related. They are together. They have different names. They are under the same company currently, but we're thinking of maybe separating this out. But one thing is a quite simple on the outside slot studio. So there's many out there like this, but we focused on, when we started in 2020. I'm from Austria, and I live since 12 years in Germany. And in Austria, I worked I started in the industry in 2001 and worked for Bet and Win back in the day. And when I started at Bet and Win, I basically was a software developer, but quickly became a product manager. And that's kind of still what I do today. So try to build products to solve problems in the industry. And so my career was always Germany facing, Austria facing, sort of continental European facing. And I remember talking to Norbert, one of the founders back then, why is he still doing that while they had basically lots of exits and cash out? And he said, well, he wants to bring down the last monopoly in Europe. And so when in March 2020, the regulation in Germany unfolded, let's say, don't know what the correct term is, the law was proposed, but it still had to be ratified. I said, well, I think I have to do something. I have to basically try for the first time, create our own company, my own company, our own company, rather than sort of joining a company or trying to get investors from day one, who then own a majority or something like this. We basically leaned into the really tough regulation in Germany. So we knew it's not going to be something which is very attractive from the outside. But, as a startup sort of philosophy, you try to find positives in all negatives sort of thing. Sort of when we saw that, it's quite punitive, the regulation, everyone is really focusing on the US 3 years ago, and today still, we felt, well, that's kind of an opportunity because everybody's going to be quite depressed about Germany, and it gives us a more sort of media attention, PR attention, sort of more space in the mindset of people by launching a slot studio for the German market at first. And that's sort of the founding story. That's what we are known for, or I'm known for currently mostly. But on day one, we sat together, and I've been doing this for a while, since 2001 really. I was always involved in APIs, in building game servers and games, and building technology tech stack of it. And from the company before and the companies before, we were the founding team, we're pretty fed up that there isn't really a compelling tech stack out there to either purchase or lease or get your hands on, but rather every studio starts from scratch, it feels. Builds their own remote gaming server, builds their own RNG, builds their own game engines, builds their own math, builds their own everything. And we're like, well, there's certain things where you need creativity, where you want to do your own thing and where you want to be unique. But there's a really, really chunky amount that's the same, essentially, from a end customer perspective, for sure, even from an operator perspective. So we decided from day one, the company will be at some point in time mostly about the back end and the front end proposition we're giving as software out to companies. We call this, now we're coming out with this more and more, we call this Hinterzimmer. It's a little bit of a wordplay again, a German wordplay, Austrian wordplay. Hinterzimmer means back room, and Hinterzimmer literally means, in Austria for sure, not sure about Germany too much, like a room where people gamble. So it's like a wordplay on back office, back end, back room, gambling, and so on. And we have a few customers on there already, but we're really only just now starting to speak about it more and make this more the face of the company, let's say, or the main proposition of the company. And while Hölle Games is growing and it's doing well, and it's will even increase in our focus in terms of games and output, but it helped us a lot to build the best showcase we can ever have, basically, for such a company, because we saw on day one, what's our market entry strategy to sell such a piece of software when we don't have it. We started with 0 lines of code, and we generated cash within 11 months, which is, I think, quite unique. There's no legacy code, there's no code we bought from anyone. So really went all in financially, personally, and also from a code perspective. There's no inheritance, there's no of code, there's no anything we got from somebody else, there's no operator who's helping us behind the scenes or anything. So it's really a clean startup story by all accounts. And so now more and more we're focusing on that sort of tooling side of things, sort of the picks and shovels strategy, if you will, in the gold rush, let's say, where everybody's digging gold, but we want to be more and more the picks and shovels provider of the industry in terms of iGaming and building games. And I'm going to stop talking for a moment so you can ask questions.
Yeah,
that's roughly where we're at.
This is why I love you. I love a picks and shovels strategy. It's far more interesting for the long term. So to understand, okay, so you've to make sure I've got this correctly. So you've got Holle Games, which is your game company. You make games. It's set up for the German market. It abides by all German regulations,
Yeah.
And it's also made for Germans. So the types of games, the branding, the look and feel.
Yeah,
it's like you've just wrapped yourselves in the German flag and you're waving a bratwurst around, and off you go, kind of thing.
And this is sort of twofold strategy, because this is also our expansion strategy for our studio. So we own our own tech stack completely and fully, not only owning it, but we also understand it. What we're having, that has, I've seen quite often a problem that owning alone doesn't mean anything if you don't understand it and know what it can do and what you can do with it. So we are, for instance, we are exploring our UK strategy now. We are close to submitting the UKGC application, and we're even considering, we're not sure yet, because Hölle Games is a very local proposition. So we wanted to be more German, even than the German providers are. And what was quite interesting is, of course, I have some credentials in the industry, but when I pitched German games to German operators, like I think 1 out of 10 times I had to actually showcase the games, because they said, well, I'm dying for localized content, and so let's just try it out, basically. And so the name Hölle Games comes from the term Spielhölle. Spielhölle is one of 3 terms for a gambling hall, and Hölle is also a slang, or like a saying for, like, it's great. Hölle Games, great games. So it's like
Nice.
a wordplay here again. And so for the UK, again, we're thinking of maybe even creating an internal virtual studio with a new name, specifically for the UK, to be even more targeted, to be more local. So to be more, let's say, British, perhaps, than the British studios out there currently. Because what everybody's doing is doing a very international strategy with international themes. And we've been seeing the amount of games on the market. We looked at this deeply, and our data tells us the amount of games is kind of not just like, it's actually exponential in the market in the last few years. So we feel it's not really ending. Everybody's saying it's too much, but I'm like, well, is this an opportunity as well? So because there's so many games out there and so many studios out there, that's why we feel the picks and shovels strategy now is potentially at an inflection point where it becomes extremely attractive. Because before, you had maybe 50 potential customers, now you have 500, and maybe in a few years you have 5,000. So suddenly it becomes really interesting. And and so we for the UK, so it's twofold. One is Holle Games for the German market, but also this is sort of a proposition we think which works for especially smaller studios, up and coming studios, to say, well, what's my niche? And everybody's saying that there's been enough fruit games out there. Yes, but I think there's probably potential to come up with 10 times as many games as there are today by just going local and sort of niche and finding a niche and finding local relevance for a local audience or a specific audience.
Yeah, look, I think that makes perfect sense because there's only so many Egyptian themed slot games you can roll out. And, licensing the big brand stuff gets expensive quick. Okay. So the back end says, so is that, so let's say I'm sitting here in Amsterdam. I've got an idea for a slot game. I've got a couple of people. We made something. I call you and I can integrate onto your platform, or what does it mean for third parties?
I just lost the connection for a second.
Can you repeat that? Yeah, let me repeat. So I'm sitting here in Amsterdam. I come up with an idea for a slot game. I build a little team. We start making our game. I call you and I get access to your platform and distribution, or I get access to tools, or how does that work?
Yeah, we because we're thinking about this differently a little bit, is we're also thinking about that the business model should change. And we can't just speak about it without doing it. So we offer basically everything you can think of in theory. So you could say, well, I have an investor who wants to own technology. How can I own your technology? So, and for that matter, we offer in a model of you can purchase the code, or at least sort of the commodity parts of the code, basically, which allow you to build your games. You can lease, or the sort of software term is SaaS, software as a service, our platform. And with both sort of these, and there's a third one, but we saw both these, we thought about pricing as well a lot, and why not. There hasn't been a company. We have basically maybe 4 or 5 competitors, because that's the amount of sort of decent companies who are out there who are doing that. But in terms of pricing, we thought, well, what's the right pricing for it? It's really hard to find pricing because in games it's easy. Everybody knows the rev share sort of rates, and you're sort of in there, and that's it. It has been established and set. But there hasn't been really good pricing established in there. And we basically looked at this from our perspective, because when we started the company, we said, well, if you find something that is cheaper than to build it, then we buy it. That was our basically thing. And we did some basic research back then, and we couldn't find anything that was cheaper by any stretch of the imagination than us building internally. And I think that's why most people still build it internally, because, well, you just need one guy for a year or 1.5 or so, and then you have a 1.0 version of it. So there's these 2 models. One is purchase and the other one is SaaS. And the third one is what we call, but that model does exist as well, but we allow it in an exchange kind of way. So it's called Powered By, which allows you to utilize all our distribution, contract-wise and license-wise. And what one customer is actually doing is consuming all 3 of those, saying, well, that's great. I want to have SaaS now, because eventually I want to take over on my own for my local market. But for the international markets where I don't have licenses, can you distribute the game? I'm like, for sure, because it's the exact same identical code base. And so we not only allow that, but also we encourage it. And also in terms of model, we felt we're not building games on the platform. Well, we shouldn't be responsible for your successes. We should only be responsible for our tech stack and that we service you. So we're moving away not on the games level, because that's creative work and hit-driven work. But on the platform level, it's a reliable platform which should be paid according to your sort of service. And so we're moving away from revenue share there. And I think because we feel like that model isn't the right one, it may be the right one to find like 2-3 big customers and then live off them for like 10 years. But for a long tail strategy, we feel rev share isn't the right one. We should get paid for a service like a SaaS company, like any CM software or any Google or whatever SaaS I don't know, Jira or Atlassian, they would never ask for your revenue, basically. I know it's not quite the same thing, but we are saying
No, it
we
makes
should
sense.
say again.
I said it makes perfect sense because there's always a tipping point with the rev share that if my business grows to a certain point, it's cheap. It's like this is ultimately I'm going to take it off my platform because I've got to go build it myself and
Yeah.
save X%. Where if it's a flat fee, it's harder in the startup stage, but it's also a filter, so you're going to get less time wasters.
Yeah.
Because there's an immediate cost.
Yeah.
But if I hit that break-even point and beyond, then it's like, well, actually, this is just the cost of doing business, and this is way easier than building all this myself, and we're getting the updates and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense.
It's like we don't want to have a lock-in effect by contract, basically. Revenue share kind of incentivizes you to do that because you invested early and you have to believe in a company. I don't quite need to believe in your company. I just need to believe that I get paid, basically. And secondly,
but like, I know I know I'm giggling, but like the amount of bullshit PowerPoint business cases I've seen, like it makes perfect sense. Like there's so many like, oh, we're gonna put our betting tips on the blockchain and we're raising 5 million for 5% or some shit. So yeah, I totally get it.
And believe that I get paid, and secondly, like there is stories out there where exactly that problem you have highlighted happened. Big stories. I didn't know about them that much until the last like 6 months, 9 months. I don't really want to name names, but they moved off of a platform basically because the revenue share bill got too high, basically. And so our lock-in effect should only ever be service. If you like our service and if you like the pricing, why would you ever leave us from SaaS, basically? I mean, buying the code can help you to like feel more in control. But if most of the code is commodity, like, hey, it's a remote game. Yes, it's very good. Yes, it's very scalable and has all these things. Has free play and has proper reporting, alerting, and disaster recovery, backups, and all this kind of sort of ticks all the boxes. But there shouldn't be a lock-in effect other than us delivering great service at a decent price, let's say. We say I never need to move away from them really, because why would I? I can do it cheaper internally, and that's sort of that's the hardest lock-in effect, because you can always leave, but you never do because you don't get it cheaper or better anywhere else. That's sort of the idea behind it.
It makes perfect sense, and I think it's it feels more like a partnership in a way. Even though the rev share, you're kind of like, well, we gain in your success, but it feels like, well, if you've done all the hard work as the client to make this a success on top of the software, then you should get all the upside.
Yeah.
So let's go. You touched on a really interesting thing at the very beginning. So you talked about kind of, the difference between startups and raising 25 million or kind of some big kind of crazy numbers. So you guys, if I remember correctly, are kind of like, we funded this, we built this, we're growing.
And sometimes there's also like obviously the more how can I say, you're proud of your own story, the more you like more you have a, how can I say, you sort of more, you read other stories with more open eyes, or like you dissect them more than you would. So we put a total of around 75,000 euros in the company between 5 people. That's the total funding the company ever received. And then also we obviously didn't pay ourselves in the first 12 months and started paying ourselves a little bit after like 18 months. So that's the real investment, let's say. But if you sort of add this into like foregone salary kind of as a real cash investment, let's say,
sure, it is.
It's still less. It's still only maybe we put in 300K, let's say, or something like this. If you really are adding all the lost salary, let's say, in there. But that's it. That's all the company ever got. And it only worked because the team is very lean. I mean, it's 5 people and we are complete except sound and music, which you mostly outsource anyways, basically. But one co-founder is doing all the artwork. One co-founder is doing all the front end. one co-founder is doing all the backend, another co-founder is doing all the compliance, product, operations, account management, and then there's me doing like whatever falls through the cracks or whatever needs moving, sales, marketing, accounting, and so on. Whereas I got help this year on a finance level, so that's really helpful. That we basically got, I would call him a late co-founder to the team. I know him for many years, so a trusted partner and adding like value and help to the team.
Fantastic. So it's because there is really there's kind of two parts, right? So there's my experience is definitely what you've done as well. It's like it's our credit card and off we go kind of thing. I've never done the PowerPoint and I'm trying to raise X million or any. I've never done, so I've got no experience of it. So I agree with you, and I see the kind of the press releases and the bits and pieces. You're like, it's a lot of money sometimes for an idea. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how that comes. And I think particularly you see it more coming from America, where it's like there's a lot of PowerPoint floating around, and there's definitely more of a venture capital, angel funding type culture, which is very alien to me. But I always feel as well that I don't have enough of a legal background to understand the T's and C's in the contract you're about to sign, because there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So if you take that funding, there's a lot of T's and C's that come along with that of what happens in the future, which is super tough.
There's we opened the door in the summer for investment, but we've been busy operationally that we didn't like really did it as a proper funding round, meaning like what that means, proper funding round, is you talk to 200 people basically, or 100 people. Our interest is small, and we've talked to 10 people or so, and something weird happened, that we talked to people in our industry, obviously, because people outside the industry are even harder to find who would fund something that they don't understand. So, and probably like 3 out of these 10 conversations, or 4, have turned into sales conversations for the platform, for the RGS level. So I'm gonna continue raising, let's say, but because it's a sales strategy, it seems at the moment. None of these have closed yet, but let's see. And I think we talked to basically people who left, basically were founders of studios who are beyond their sort of non-competes now, and they're sort of toying with the idea of doing studios again, and we came across them, and as investment, sort of, that was the idea. And then they're like, well, valuation and revenue and then this is a secondary business model. I'm like, yeah, but it's becoming our primary business model. Hopefully that's the idea at least. Well, how much is it? And so on. And suddenly they're like, well, should I invest or should I sort of purchase the code and go off my own way where I have 100% control? And so it seems like these conversations turn into sales conversations. And also we've been growing according to plan, which is obviously plans are always quite optimistic. So we've been growing roughly according to plan. So we're like, okay, we have never had an urgency to raise, but it's always nicer to in this really tough games building environment where it's all about upfront cash. It's not like B2C where you rent a platform and then you take 5 customers and after 3 days you have massive income. You get it's actually quite a bad business model building games when you start, because you get paid last. You need to have an idea. You need to formulate that idea. You need to build it. Then you need to sell it. Then you need to integrate. Then you need to go live, which is another issue. Then after go live, you need to wait for a full month to pass to issue an invoice. And then you have 45 days or so till you actually can issue an invoice. Then you have another 20 days till you get paid. So you get paid last, really. So raising money makes sense for B2B game studios a lot, because it's takes a long time till you get paid. But once you are over the hill, let's say, and you have enough distribution, enough games, enough revenue coming in, you cash flow positive, it's really hard to get killed, let's say. So that's the beauty on the other side of the rainbow of that business model. And
it's very similar to the affiliate model. where you take all the risk up front, but then there's a snowball effect over 5 years or whatever the time period is, where it becomes a monster.
Yeah.
So in terms of like for anybody listening, in terms of like I don't know, obviously interest rates are going up, inflation, there's various wars happening, the world, the economy is fundamentally changed. Obviously you've got a very compelling business case, but how overall did you feel like the funding environment was, or kind of people's interest or appetite for investments?
We got some, we got some good feedback, and we are taking that to heart. And and the primary feedback was, Robert, what are you? Are you like a platform business, or are you a games business? Are you a studio, or what are you? And then, though our revenue is okay, we're not doing badly. You can calculate for yourself. Like if you're 7 people and we pay ourselves maybe not full market salary, but let's say 60, 70, 75% market salary or something, and we're cash flow positive, you can kind of tell what revenue we're on. So we are still early, but then when you talk to investors in our industry, I think everybody needs to find a hook, or like a reference of valuations and so on. And we're valued purely as a B2B game studio. But we saw obviously much more in our business. We saw much more of a VC case and are seeing more of a VC case or a 100x case. And on the platform level. So we're like, well, the revenue is almost hindering us maybe from getting a good valuation, let's say, or more a valuation which would fit to a VC case, let's say. And so we got that feedback. What are you? Are you a games business, and because I only can value the games business. So because I didn't really talk to 1,000 investors, 100 investors, I talked to like 10 or 12, and 2 or 3 conversations are still going on. I felt like it's a tougher environment, but I can't really speak to it too much. It's like, I think because my sample is relatively small, and the people come from gaming, so they value us as a game studio, and the game studio valuations are really low at the moment. So what we're doing is kind of, we are thinking of repositioning us, which we're doing anyways naturally, but just basically doing what we're doing, and sort of redo the pitch entirely in terms of picks and shovels, and put Hölle Games really on the back, let's say, as a showcase. But for that we need to close a few more deals and onboard these clients, which we're doing now, and generate revenue in this sort of RGS vertical, and to raise from there. But I think the climate is pretty tense. But the question is, what's going to happen in 2024? Really, that's the big one, yeah. Because everybody thinks interest rates might receive a cut next year. Is it going to be summer? Is it going to be Q1? Is it going to be politically motivated, maybe even the US, for re-electing somebody? Who knows? Yeah, are the wars going to be impacted by that, or is the overall global economy relatively detached from these sort of events? Let's say. Who knows? I think mostly my belief system is it's a lot has to do with sentiment. If people feel uncertain about the future, then money is not moving. If people feel relatively certain about the future, even though the future might not explode or we don't have the highest growth rates going on, but if you feel there's a certain degree of certainty, then money flows easier, I would say. But I can tell you more next year. Let's see if we are raising, depending, like at the moment we're formulating our plans, what we actually would need for a growth strategy. We might not need that much. So let's see. We definitely want to enter UK now next year. We are, it's because we have 2 businesses. One is the studio and one is the platform, the RGS business. We have 2 reasons to get licenses. We actually lost the deal because we didn't have a UK license, and that we got confirmed by a couple of people. So it really was all about the UK license. That's why we lost that particular deal. So we certainly want to enter the US also at some point in time. For that, we don't have enough capital because we feel like we need probably $1 million, a little bit less perhaps, to enter with all our games and do all 5 licenses at once, basically. So that might be a reason to sort of accelerate us to make sure we get the licensing infrastructure done as quickly as possible to supercharge the powered by business, let's say, of the platform.
Sure.
And that's sort of the reason why we really would want to raise money, and also to put more focus on sort of hiring tech talent into our company. And we have a policy or strategy or something like this where we only want to work with seniors. So we refrained from hiring quite a few candidates because we felt, well, they are perfect, they're great for a certain position in a certain company, but we only want to work with seniors. That's sort of, if somebody asks us for company benefits, it's like, yeah, you get to work with the founders and only with senior people. Take that as a company benefit rather than your foosball table or something else, or your Friday lunch or something, That's a lot more fun.
You just give it like 2 thumbs up, you get to work with the big guy.
Well, it's not me. It's not me. It's the other, basically. They're 7.
I'm teasing.
Yeah, no, but it's
but it's true.
Yeah, you're right. It's a little bit of a self-praise here. I'm sorry. But
I'm totally going to do that soon.
yeah,
I love it.
Okay.
I'm stealing it.
No, it's like it's fun. It's fun to run to produce something which has value, which is unique, to stand on your own 2 feet, and to produce cash, really, produce great games, great products, and sort of look around left, right, and center. And I keep asking because I'm interested. Like, do you know a company like ours who started with little money in that space, let's say, and sort of made it? And maybe there's somebody. There is certainly a few. I don't know many of them. So it's quite a unique story, although the company doesn't look that unique, but with the platform and the kind of interesting deals we announced in Q1, it will, hopefully it will look also exciting from the outside, not
They'll
just
be
from the inside.
beating your door down to shovel cash into your business, so that you'll be fine, mate. Don't worry about it.
The way I look at it is like from a helping perspective. I always like to help people. I always like when people help me, and we do this we have a couple of studios we're friendly with. They have their own infrastructure, they have their own RGS, but we still sort of found a technical way that they're part of our Powered by program. So we help them to reach distribution they couldn't reach as quickly we had. To help them in the sense that they maybe help us to find more of these kinds of deals, basically. And I find it more interesting. I find it quite interesting as well because we get to have conversations with companies you never find out, basically. I found out just yesterday. Can't really say too much, but there's a few key German games in the German market. And I always thought it was done by a German developer, but then I found out it was done by a studio in Brisbane, Australia. I'm like, how did that happen? It's quite interesting. So you're exposed to a lot of other conversations you would never be exposed to if you only ever are a studio and talk to the head of gaming, let's say.
For sure. Well, look, but that's that platform mentality as well. Like there's a flywheel effect to a platform. That the more games you've got integrated onto your platform, the better it is for the suppliers, the better it is for the customers, and so there's a huge kind of flywheel thing that happens there too. And then the data flow and the everything else that you kind of see, everything else.
And there's boring stuff which never got when you focus on the platform. There's from the outset quite boring stuff, but it's problems we are having, and the problems become more emphasized when the company structures change. I mean, typically these types of studios we are running now, they needed 30 people, 25 people, or 20 people or so. So certain things you are not quite visible because we are only 5 and now 7 and 8. A really boring topic was invoicing, which I totally underestimated how complex it is because every deal is different. And there's a lot of variance in all those deals. There's a revenue share, there's NGR, there's bonusing, there is the Swiss tax rate, and then there's collapsing rates, there's scaling rates, there's all kinds of deals. And some you can invoice against your numbers, with some you have to wait for a report to be done. And because we are startup, we look at this a little bit differently. We're like, okay, how can we automate this or half automate this? And we're done with an internal product now. It still only has a Google Sheet UI, but it's basically an underlying, it's all in our internal database. So we're still working on the UI, but it took me, because I did it personally, and we don't have 1,000 contracts. We maybe have like 30 contracts, but they are then attached to many different brands as well. So it's a lot more customers than these 30, but you have 30 individual deals, and each one of them was different. So at some point, like, I was basically dying, because you have to do an invoice also for like smaller sort of deals you have, not only for the big deals. So at I think early in the year, I think the peak was, it took me 2 weeks personally, basically, or maybe let's say 7 days, 8 working days, to do the whole invoicing. And I looked at other companies, I asked other companies, and when you're like 30 people and you have 2 people or 3 people in your finance team to do all the invoicing for the entire month, you don't quite feel it, because it's 10% of your workforce and they bring in the money, so it's justified. But part of that platform now is also an invoicing tool, which semi-automates or fully automates basically the invoicing. And also we're working on APIs into accounting tools, so you can basically integrate it directly into Sage and other things.
Nice.
So it gets actually really automated, because once the company size shrinks to like a one-man team or two-woman team or whatever, or one-woman team, you're like, okay, I can do all the ideas of the games, I can build the games, but then I have to do the invoicing as well. Suddenly becomes a real problem, because you realize like how many people it takes, and these are the kind of boring fun problems, because like, how much would you be willing to pay on a SaaS model for such a module if it replaces 3 people, let's say, or 2 people?
Oh, for sure, because it's one of those things of, if you've got like, as you scale, if you've got to hire more people just to do invoicing or just to do whatever the admin task is, like something's like you said, the technology's there. We can automate this and just either automate it or outsource it. All right, but then it's money, so you don't want to outsource that, because you want to make sure the invoices are right. Every penny counts. So you have to automate it too. But I'm a huge believer in this as well. I think the more you can automate or design systems to make it as easy as possible to get stuff done. And there is kind of obviously in a startup mode, it's that kind of, look, we'll just brute force our way through this. But those temporary solutions end up becoming permanent, because there's so much else to do and there's so much else going on. That if you don't just take the pain of, okay, if this goes from 30 customers to 100 customers, now with 5 brands each, we're in an absolute nightmare, and it gets too hard to fix.
And we have seen this so often that there's another secondary effect which I've seen, is developers leaving. Because you have all these mundane tasks of entering a new country, adding a language, or optimizing that game rules of that game for that sort of, feature or something like this. We said no. From day one, we said no. We spent more time in the beginning. It was totally counterintuitive, totally not what you sort of would expect. But we felt, well, how can we make the compliance part of the games interesting as a task for us, basically as a project? And so we looked at all the European, that was day 1 or week 1, basically, or week 2 or week 3. We looked at all jurisdictions in Europe, because we kind of had a good view. We just came from another studio. So we had a good view on what the regulations were and are in all over Europe. And we built this natively from day 1 into the platform. So now everybody's just like freaking out on Skype when we say, well, can you change this and this? And you have 2 weeks, and they're like shaking if you can do it in 2 weeks. And we sent them a link to the staging where it's done after like 20 seconds, because it's all just a setting. I mean, it's kind of what you expect from like the really large companies. Certainly not what you expect from a startup, basically focusing on the German market or something like this. But suddenly it becomes also more fun. And I've seen developers, once you grow and like you say, these issues become sort of permanent, and it's permanently solved, and you're like, well, can we hire a junior into the team who does all that let's be clear, shit, basically, nobody wants to do. I'm like, well, why don't we ever take the time? And then you need to make a business case when you work for somebody that this is more important than signing a new deal and so on. But if you are able to have a more concentrated vision, basically, or strategy, then you can make those decisions to make this better platform and make your life easier. And I think that's why we have been quite consistent with our output, because typically what happens is you output a few games and then you struggle and then you don't output for like half a year or something like this. And in our team of 5, now 7, soon 8, we did output, and again, we started with 0 lines of code. We did output around, I think, 35 games thus far in 3 years. And the first year basically was just building the platform, or the initial part of the platform and the initial set of the frameworks for the front end. So I think that's quite strong. So and it speaks. So the proof is in the pudding. That speaks for a lean platform, because there's no other way to do that other than really building a platform and a front end GDK, game development kit, that allows for this universal building of games. Again, what we're doing isn't really like I wouldn't even call it innovation. I would call it cutting edge. I would call it maybe counterintuitive for a small company. It's maybe what larger companies have done. But the more larger companies I talk to, or people who left from these larger companies, the more I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. We solve it with money, because we are so money rich. Why would we ever get our senior developers of this big project, which unlocks $1 million of revenue, to optimize invoicing? Why would we ever do that, basically? Yeah. So they never get around to do it. So I think that makes it quite exciting and gives me the hope that we have a chance to scale the platform business.
Well, look, there's obviously huge benefits for people who use the platform, and then it really sounds like to me that you've got everything in place, or obviously there's always going to be more, but if the foundations are there, then building and scaling becomes much easier. There's always other problems or other bottlenecks, or that's just business. The one thing you haven't mentioned, we've talked about a lot of stuff. So if we kind of look to the future, the one buzzword I haven't heard is machine learning or AI or ChatGPT or anything like that. Like, is there a role for that in this?
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of two answers, and we went deep down the rabbit hole quite early in machine learning AI. We really started. I mean, we kind of knew this was coming, but really we're deep diving since middle of last year, so quite early, basically. But I mean, what we're discovering really in this sort of building of games vertical in our industry, there's so many inefficiencies. I mean, yes, let's do machine learning and talk more about this a little bit, but there's so much to be solved without it already. There's so much waste, basically, in terms of how stuff gets done. So I have this, let's say, market participant. Wouldn't call it competitor, but like another studio I'm friendly with, but we're not cooperating with them. They are independent completely. They don't need our service. Don't want our service. But like I talk to employees there, and they're like 70, 80 people, and their output is roughly the same in terms of quantity. I think quality may be similar, let's say. And I talk to employees that they cannot comprehend how we do that. They generally believe I'm lying to them, or telling them a half lie that I have like 10 freelancers working for us, but we have 0 freelancers working for us. They just can't comprehend. So we on one hand we went deep down the rabbit hole of AI, and you see this also on LinkedIn now. Now it's a little bit more. We didn't want to talk about it initially because we were really, really early to use this and go into this. And what became quite clear is it's sort of easy now to develop like a background, let's say, image in, let's say, Midjourney or something like this. But the question will be, how can you really use it in a sense that you can scale up production significantly, basically. Yeah, and that like every time you develop a game, you discover what is the critical path, basically, what takes the longest, basically, and then you push that down, and then you find something else that takes the longest. And doing artwork was always a critical path, and is a critical path, and now that's pushed down to a degree because, like a beautiful character, if you know how to do it correctly as well, that it doesn't look like completely like a single prompt in Midjourney, let's say, is quite difficult. And so the question will be like the way we look at this as well. This is quite a scary thought. Is what you have to like understand, I think, and work backwards. That's what we're trying to do. That's why the platform strategy is not just important. It might be survival in 5 years, let's say. Is will there be a point in the future, let's say 2030, where you can fully automate game development? Basically, that's sort of the question. Is that possible? And then you work backwards. Like, where would you start today, and to move into that direction? And how would the industry look like? And why would it work, basically? And trying to frame this properly. But how would a world look like in 2030 where there's like companies who can do that, and then suddenly the cost goes down, basically? Would this mean all studios die and just one studio survives, or what do you mean? Yeah, interested to hear also what you think of such a future. Yeah, or would it mean it's like how do you win? And sort of what you see unfolding with ChatGPT and Gemini and others is, well, the tool alone is one thing, but you also need distribution. That's the other thing. So that's component number 2. And number 3, you need a platform to fill the life into it, basically. So you need a way to put games together in a way that it actually can scale. Because if you are reducing one critical path, now doing a symbol, let's say, but you still have all the other critical paths, then you're not really making anything much faster, let's say, or much better. So I think that's roughly the way we look at it, and be thinking backwards and leaning into it. That's why the platform part for us is quite appealing, because there's a few things we're doing also on the platform side where we are we're working with a machine learning analytics company currently who analyzed our data. It was quite interesting. Analyzed all our bet records, anonymized, and it was so interesting to see certain highlights in our data which pinpointed to optimizations we could build in the games. This was kind of the first time I felt like, oh, I'm looking at more than GGR per player and games per player, but really looking deep into the game. And like the thing we always talk about, analytics and games and so on. But it was the first time I really felt like, oh, wow, this is interesting, because machine learning cannot only deliver you the answers, but can also ask the right questions against your data. And that's quite compelling, because I know there's stuff in my data I can't quite figure out why it's the way it is. And I don't quite know like what questions to ask sometimes. It's I mean, I think in the early days when I started working in the industry, there was this heat map CM companies which tried to do something similar, where you looked at the data and you entered verticals and you saw heat maps, and we discovered there was a heat map on age group between 18 and 22, and another age group in the same heat map at like 65. We're like, that's interesting, but you would never ask the question, basically. And that's also how I feel with the data we got back from this one partner.
So you threw out a question to me about the like where I see it. I think so. I've been playing around a lot with different AI tools, like the chat GPTs and the bards and stuff. And for me, it's kind of they're really confident, even when they're wrong. And just like I've been like there's this website I registered with, and it gives you like these really detailed prompts that you can put in. So I was playing around with one at the weekend, and it was like, okay, like I'm a marketing guy, right? So can ChatGPT put me out of a job? So I used this really detailed prompt, all the kind of questions and stuff to come up with some names for a new company, right? So branding's a thing. Can ChatGPT come up with a new name for a company and justify why? And I spent probably 2-3 hours on it, and they were all shit. Like but the output was like, it had a name, it had a table, it had scored stuff. It looked like if I'd have put that into a PowerPoint, it's exactly what you'd get from a mid-level borderline shit consultant.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I'd describe it. So it's that kind of mid-level consultant, not particularly good, but has a good relationship with somebody in the company, and it's just, you can't get rid of it. And that's kind of what it felt like I was getting. I think from you talked about coding and stuff as well. I think the kind of the co-pilot kind of code stuff.
Yeah.
I could see it helping a senior developer.
Yeah.
Be more effective, like just turbocharging a senior developer, because code is right or wrong. I know that's not technically true, but it's more precise than a brand name, which is still very vague.
And I mean, like, what's really powerful, I don't know if you've tried it, and that was just recently released with this bigger token size to basically train on your own data. And that's really powerful, where you say, well, I have written personally these 20 blog posts. Can you read them and write a new blog post with this sort of topic on based on my data? That's incredibly powerful. And basically the way I think to look at this is, it's like 99.99% of output of AI is unused, basically, because everybody's experimenting, and it's too wide and too broad, and it's like too generic, let's say. So you almost need to strangle the AI, let's say, to go into the direction you want it to go. And the more you discover this sort of tooling, and in artwork, like we use Stable Diffusion quite a fair bit. It's an open source tool, so we are quite confident that we can keep using it as well. And what we've built for a client I can't really name the client, but there's a client who has a character on their site, and they made a big sort of photo shoot with the character. And what we were able to do for the client is, and they were just blown away, basically, is, well, can we have all the images from the photo shoot? So we took all the images and trained a model. It's called a LoRa model on Stable Diffusion with this. And we're able to basically say, well, what do you want it to be? Basically, well, we want to design this game, which is a mix of this character and Red Riding Hood, for instance. So suddenly, once you strangle the AI, let's say, and limit it and train it to that sort of specific use case, it becomes really, really freakishly powerful, because suddenly we had this character who, looked like that character, but we gave him more muscles, and we made him point in a certain direction, gave him a hat or something like this. And that's really powerful, because I think you need to make it in a way that you don't feel it's AI generated. That AI generation is basically too generic, and what you experience was very generic, very open-ended, very bullshit bingo consulting kind of stuff, basically. But the more you make it in a way that people don't actually realize that it is generic, that it's sort of strangled or directed at a certain use case, I think that's where it goes. And the power, obviously, is also, the more you understand this, the more you go inwards into your own company and say, well, what data do I possess?
Exactly.
That's unique compared to others,
And I think that's the key bit, because, okay, it's probably, I know Google's got some stuff you can use on their Google Cloud to build your own things, and ChatGPT's new one. But I think ultimately they've got the compute, or whatever they call it these days. They've got the massive data centers that can actually generate these good, do stuff with it. But if you go back to your picks and shovels analogy, part of that is actually bespoke or unique data. So people who are sitting on data, and I know this has been said for years, data's the new gold and data's the new oil and blah, blah, blah. But now you can actually, there's a lot of talk about big data and all this kind of stuff, but actually that unique data there's such a real world thing now. Okay, hey, we've got a couple of billion game spins across all these games, across all these platforms, and anonymized user data behind it. Like you said, taking that information, mining it for insights, mining it for innovation, ideas, mining it for testing opportunities, etc., is huge. And I think between like it's 2023, nearly 2024 now. So the next 6 years, I think, we're at the Nokia 2310 kind of stage of AI, but we'll get to the iPhone 7 really quickly. Right, that's the thing. The I think the scale of this is going to be very fast and much faster than we're used to. But whoever's got that data, and then the other question is, like, if you upload your data to one of these platforms, do you still own that data? Is that like ring fenced? Or is it now their data as well? Is it our data?
There is there's this meme out there of this guy who was in a coma for the morning basically, and woke up at lunchtime, and the lady told him, I woke up with, it's you've been in a coma since this morning. He's like, oh wow, can you tell me what all this good AI stuff happened in the last few hours? So basically it's a lot of stuff is happening very quickly. And we looked at this, like this video now is being disrupted by AI. There's lots of really interesting stuff going on, and it questions you, what is IP basically? Yeah, what do you own? What do you don't own? There's these videos floating around of somebody basically taking Matrix clips from the Matrix where they're fighting, where Agent Smith fights against Morpheus, and overlaying it with completely different characters, different scenery, different characters. So does the studio who made the movie own the moves? Is that IP? What is it? Yeah. So it, like the whole IP. There also been a lawsuit, I think, in the US. I don't know if it's settled or yet. I think one lawsuit actually was very positive in terms of AI. Can AI be copyrighted? And I think that actually, I didn't read the full, obviously, court case, but it was quite celebrated in the community that once, I think it said something along the lines, if there's enough human contribution, yes, it can. But what is enough, basically? A prompt is probably not enough. But if you manipulate, or if you add enough human value, let's say, then yes. But still, I mean, what took you 100 hours suddenly takes you 3 hours, including the human interaction. So, and like your question is like data. Like, I mean, like the argument was always with this training data is, well, I'm just doing what a human is doing. I'm looking at the data. You still own it. I haven't taken it away from you. I'm inspired by your data, let's say. Is that taking it away? Is that using it? Is that breaking IP law? Because as a human, as an artist or a writer, you're like, I'm going to read this book and then I'm going to make a write-up of that book. That you can do. So I think these are all really, really interesting and tough questions in the future. And probably they will all be on the side of the sort of human comparison. And if and when, or if they all land on the human side of the comparison side legally, then some businesses are going to be heavily disrupted. I always get emails from art studios basically asking if we need help. And the rate of questions and rate of requests has been increasing crazy in the last 6 months. So either they're using it heavily and got disrupted, or they're fearing for basically loss of revenue because they can't make business anymore from their staff doing relatively generic art basically for slots. So I don't quite see that the slots industry is going to be it seems like everybody's using it now. The cat is out of the bag. It wasn't out of the bag a year ago, really, but the cat is out of the bag. There was this post from what's his name? Evolution CPO. Sorry, escapes my mind. Basically said he played around with Midjourney and so on, and Endorphina posted something, and then there was a video recently of some guys comparing like 4 or 5 slots and trying to figure out whether they were AI or not. So it's kind of everyone is using it. But the question is, where does it lead? Really, what's the path? Also for like affiliates and SEO, like where does it lead? Because what everybody's fearing is the people don't go to google.com to the search engine anymore, but they go to chat.openai.com as your destination site, basically, or as your starting page. Where would it lead? Yeah. So it's and I think the uncertainty makes it interesting to develop products into. I think that's the point.
Absolutely. Look, there's always opportunities. It's these things are always going to change. There'll be a lot of change, but also a lot will stay the same. And I think the hype train, the reality of this and the use cases will keep developing. Like I said, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening with images and videos. And like if you look on Reddit, like somebody just made a Adidas ad using AI, and it's fantastic, right? So I think there's a lot of things where there's a lot going to change, but then you still need somebody with like me sitting down to make that Adidas video with no artistic talent. It's not going to be the same, right? So I think it's like the like I could sit down and generate some Python code, but somebody who actually knows how to code Python will get far more out of the tool. So it's like, okay, we've discovered a hammer, and then how are we going to use it? And the carpenter will use it far better than I will.
I feel like you go like you say, it's hype cycles a little bit. I feel like in the beginning, like I don't know, when the whole e-commerce sort of it's going to disrupt everything. 2099, and obviously there was Amazon.com, but then you sort of settled in the life moved on. You still ate food in a regular restaurant and so on. And I think the cat is out of the bag, but still it settled down. Life goes on. You still have problems to solve. You still have to sell your games. You still have the platform to put your games on. In our case, for instance, ChatGPT is still, when you go now there and you ask for information, it's searching on Bing.com. So it's kind of, but I think, it would be interesting to see, like now some companies are working hard on the backend side of things, on the technology side of things, to see how you can actually use it and really disrupt certain areas. And that we likely want to see next year, the year after, how that unfolds. And particularly interested, obviously, how slots do this sort of will adopt to it. And again, it's all about finding, when you have like 10 tasks to do in a game, what if one task takes zero amount of time, but still all the other tasks still remain? So it's a part is disrupted, but all the other parts are now taking too long. Like we discovered that invoicing takes too long because we're so small. We realized it takes too long. So let's internally disrupt invoicing. So it goes down from 7 days per month to 5 days now. Now it's with this tooling is probably down to 2 days or maybe 1 day for one person. So that's quite exciting. But now, we realize other things take too long, and you disrupt this after another. So it's going to be interesting to watch the next 2-3 years where this is going, and how it actually could eventually in 5-6 years completely change the landscape. Like maybe some of these big guys are going to get attacked heavily by execution, not by having a legacy title, let's say.
I look, there's the old saying in cycling, it never gets easier, you just go faster. And I think that applies here. I think the smaller companies that can use the tech and can innovate will able to move at such a pace that a big company with 70 people, 300 people, a couple of thousand people just can't. They're big oil tankers, and it's just so hard to shift directions or jump on opportunities, and it's a classic kind of innovator's dilemma type scenario. So embrace your size and embrace the speed and the nimbleness.
What do you think is going to happen in affiliates and SEO with the whole explosion of free content, let's say?
But it's nothing really, because there's always been free content. You could go onto Upwork and hire a call center in India to do it. So from an affiliate perspective, the barriers to entry for an affiliate are ridiculously low. Like basically anybody with a free website can be live in an afternoon. So that doesn't change. I think for affiliates, like every day you've got to kind of wake up and beat the internet is the challenge. There's advantages with size. There's advantages with how long you've been doing it. But you've also got to be very self-aware and very humble in terms of, well, just because it used to work doesn't mean it'll keep working. So constantly, like, are we disrupting ourselves? Are we doing the right stuff? Are we building a brand? Are we really servicing our customers, really working with our partners?
I see. So the threshold for that particular task was already quite low.
Ridiculously low.
Of the industry as a whole, because it was 1 out of 10 things which went from...
He's just being modest, Robert. I've got to say, though, the affiliate content, there's some really good stuff out there. And it pains me to say that, you know, as somebody that's worked in the sort of B2B side of publishing for the industry, but there's some really good quality content out there, and people are really thinking laterally, and actually reporting on affiliate sites is more like business reporting than you're seeing in a lot of the industry titles.
Well, if you look at how often you quote casino.org in your daily newsletter.
Yeah, it fucking blows my mind. I linked out to a story of theirs in the newsletter I sent a little while ago. And they've got a great way of just taking a lateral look at things. And I really appreciate that, because it's not dissimilar to the way my brain works, but they're tackling stuff and everybody else is then catching up with them. And that's really odd.
Yeah. You're right. There's also this one affiliate in Germany. They have kind of two things. One is more like gray facing. The other one is white facing. Spins Factory, I think DE is the German one. And they've always been, I think they have good relationships with people. So they don't really get secrets, but they get sort of the things which are known but quicker, and they report properly on it. And they've always been my number source. And then other publications, not naming them, but the big ones basically, rewrite this, rehash this, but it takes them a week, you know, not even like a day or something, or hours, but it takes them a week to rehash the same story in English, and then losing its soul as well. So you're right. So there's always room for good content, and you don't get that from AI. You only get that from sort of having that relationships and understanding of the industry and what's appealing and what's new and what's exciting. You're right. So, you know, always look for a good application for, you know, regulation in Germany. And it's caught up because there's a couple of lawyers who are, you know, sort of presenting themselves at conferences and podcasts, new podcasts. So you get it quite quickly these days, but it wasn't the case 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, where they were everywhere. But so you only had this few affiliates or blogs, let's say, who provided good content, and the big old publications had to catch up.
That's the thing. I think we've covered everything, Robert.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's good to...
Great to catch up.
Thank you for
well done. Super excited to see what happens in 2024. Same. And you'll have to come back and tell us all about it.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Robert, thank you very, very much for oh, crap, I've just dropped everything off my desk. This is going well. Yes, thank you very, very much for joining us, Robert. It's always a pleasure. I'm sorry I've been very quiet, but it's already been a long day.
Thank you for your time.
Brilliant.
We'll see you soon. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Gambling Files podcast, please find us on LinkedIn. Give us a big, juicy, succulent like. That nearly went wrong. You can find us under the name The Gambling Files Podcast. You can find us on Twitter under The Gambling Files. I think the handle is just @Gambling Files. You can connect to myself, John Bruford, or Fintan Costello, also on LinkedIn. We're also both on Twitter. And you can find all of our previous episodes at www.thegamblingfiles.com. If you enjoyed it, please share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues, and we'll see you next time.